Hello, I'm John with Taylor Decks, and this is Tom with Croco Painting. Today we're going to be talking about staining the deck. So we'll go over stains, spray gun, tips, brushes, and different kind of stains. The best thing to do is look at the back of the can of the manufacturer, the product you're going to use, to see what they recommend for drying time after you've cleaned the deck to when you're going to stain the deck. Most of them are a minimum of 24 hours to 48 hours.
5-in-1 painter's tool?
Is that comes in real handy between your gaps. A lot of times you'll have some pine needles on the side, of course.
Nuts,
maybe
whatever.
if you got dogs, maybe have hair, some hair gathered in the cracks. You can blow your deck off. Keep it clean. Before we start sanding, a lot of times we'll take a little orbital sander, 80 grit, 120 grit. We'll sand the rail caps down. You do have oil-based stains, latex stains. Probably the big difference is oil-based penetrates into the product, whereas a latex stain stays more on the surface. And the things also we'll use is a pad. We'll put the spray on the floor with the spray gun. We use a combination of a pad and come back and pat it out. Tom has a brush in his hand, and sometimes we'll back brush things.
The brushes you want to use a white or black china bristle for oil-based stain. You want to use a nylon brush for an acrylic water-based stain. Or every 30 to 45 minutes, just stir it back up, get all that stuff wound back up, because it will sit and settle in the bucket as the day goes along. When you assess how much product you need for your project, the back of the can tells you how much square footage 1 gallon of stain will do. Check and see how much product you need for your job. Good rule of thumb is to always intermix all your cans together, just to ensure a nice uniform color. When you start out doing your job, a good way to apply your stain and to cut your job in half for your do-it-yourselfers is with an electric airless paint sprayer. If you don't have one, you can rent one. Check with your local home centers and see if they do allow oil-based products to go through the machines that they rent you. Some do, some don't. So it's a good way to check and see, let them know the product you're putting down, and if you are allowed to do that. You really can't roll a stain on. It is, a real thin consistency, so the best way to do it is apply it with a paint sprayer.
And we'll make sure when we spray our deck boards, we'll spray between the cracks, catching half of the board on each side, and also on the other board we're doing between the cracks, and then come back to the middle of the board or whatever. So somehow you want to get stain between the boards if at all possible.
Yes. And always apply enough stain that the wood will allow. Don't be too short with your stain. Don't be too liberal to where it won't dry.
The product we use today, they recommend wet on wet. Not 2 coats, use 1 coat or wet on wet. And how I determine that is, one is how thick my first coat goes on. If I put on a pretty good coat and spread it out real well, and if I turn around and look back in say 10 or 15 minutes and it's absorbed into that wood already, I'm going to dust another coat on. That's your wet on wet.
Yes. You just want to make sure it doesn't puddle, it doesn't pool. Spread it out evenly.
When you're spraying a deck, not so much when you're just brushing a deck. When you're spraying a deck, it's some respirators. Very important to put respirators on. And what I want to stress is about cleanup. And anything that you have that has mineral spirits on it or has a stain on it, you don't want to put it in a plastic bag or a paper bag and let it sit there. You can't start a fire. I know, I've done it. What you want to do is make sure anything has a stain on it, the rags, paper towels, you make sure you wet them down. Put them in the stain can when you're done with them. Wet them down, put them in the stain can, put the cap over it, whatever. Today we used an oil-based stain. There is oil-based, there's latex. I mostly used oil-based, which absorbs into the wood a little bit more. Wet on wet product, or one nice heavy coat. Once again, we feathered it out with a brush, with the pad.